Hello, and thank you for having us. We are grateful the BC Support Unit has organized a conference dedicated to research that puts patients first, and for the opportunity to share our exciting research with you. We would like to start by acknowledging the beautiful lands upon which we live, work, and play. In the spirit of reconciliation, we are grateful for the unceded traditional territories of many Indigenous communities across Canada, where participants of our research reside. I live in British Columbia and am participating in this conference from the traditional unceded territory of the Coquitlam First Nations. Aaron lives in Manitoba and joins today from the unceded traditional shared lands of the Dakota and the Anishinaabe. Together, we celebrate the diversity of Canada and invite you to reflect on the territory from which you join us today. My name is Lana Sullivan, and I am co-investigator on the Hummingbird Project and a project manager at BC Women's Hospital and Health Centre. I joined the Hummingbird team 3 years ago after partnering with care providers and bereaved parents across BC to develop resources on miscarriage, lactation after loss, autopsy, and to provide general resources to support families impacted by perinatal loss. I have come to recognize my involvement in this work extends beyond my professional role. This picture is of my dad, who died of brain cancer when I was 14. As a teenager experiencing loss, I lived through the stigma of death and understand personally the isolation of grief. My passion and commitment to the Hummingbird Project and my work on perinatal loss stems from my commitment to supporting people trying to live with traumatic grief.
My name is Erin Bone, and I am co-investigator on the Hummingbird Project and a bereaved parent. My second child, my daughter Ryan, was stillborn just days before her due date almost 12 years ago. This photo is the first and only picture of all 3 of my babies together. Big sister Gracie hamming it up for the camera, as every 3-year-old does, a painting of Ryan in the background, and me pregnant with our little brother Quinn. One of the biggest questions I've always struggled with is, how do I parent Ryan? I'm still her mom, she's still my daughter, she has a place in our family. With encouragement from my family and birthing doctor, Dr. Mann, I set out to find my place in the bereavement world. At the time, I was living in Prince George, BC. The University Hospital of Northern BC heard my story and helped bring in a cuddle cot. Knowing the cuddle cot would give families more time with their beautiful babies, I found my purpose. And with that, I knew I wanted to continue doing more meaningful work. In 2019, I was asked to be a part of the Hummingbird Project, working with fellow bereaved moms, clinicians, and researchers who want to provide support and awareness of stillbirth. I knew I arrived at my next meaningful task. We represent the Hummingbird Project team, a group of researchers, clinicians, and parents dedicated to reducing the stigma and silence around stillbirth. The focus of our research is stillbirth and learning how best to support those grieving after stillbirth. For the last 3 years, the Hummingbird Project has focused on research related to improving resources for families with lived experience of stillbirth. We began with the idea that group care classes would help those experiencing subsequent pregnancy after stillbirth. We partnered with bereaved parents. We learned that they did not need group care classes as they were already attending many appointments. What they wanted was a podcast. Participants shared podcasts would help them feel a connection with someone with a similar experience from the comfort of their own home. In this presentation, we are excited to share our first learnings about the vision for our podcast to support families after stillbirth. So, what exactly do we mean when we talk about stillbirth? In Canada, stillbirth is defined as the birth of a baby at equal or greater than 20 weeks gestation, or with a birth weight equal or greater than 500 grams, which shows no signs of life at birth. Medical termination happens when the pregnant person's life or health is in danger, or if the baby has abnormalities in the major organs with chances of no or low survival after birth. For our research, we include pregnancy losses from our medical termination in our definition of stillbirth.
Stillbirth is the essence of traumatic grief. Joanne Cacciatore, leading expert in the area of traumatic grief, an award-winning author on grief, death, and trauma, defines traumatic grief as any sudden or unexpected death, violent or disfiguring death, homicide, suicide, or death that follows prolonged suffering. The death of a child of any age from any cause is always traumatic for the parents. Joanne describes traumatic grief as shocking in its intensity, so much so that it overwhelms the person's ability to cope. Ferralis et al. Reminds us that unique from the grief following the death of an older child, the grief after a baby is stillborn is remarkably underestimated, disenfranchised, and misunderstood. Traumatic grief permeates every aspect of our being and is lost so unbearably painful that the grieving person simply can't adapt without an enormous amount of support. Support for those who experience traumatic grief comes in two forms. Medicalized support includes medication and institutionalization. Social support is known to improve mental, physical, and emotional health outcomes and safeguards against stress. Cacciatore describes 4 supportive actions in grief. Acts of emotional caring refers to logistical help with available services. Emotional support includes expressions of caring, compassion, and trust building. Instrumental support provides actionable aid that helps with specific tasks. And appraisal support is peer-to-peer contact, feedback, and social equality. Although less is known about the exact sources of support beneficial to those who live through stillbirth, there is significant evidence in the literature demonstrating strong social support for those with intense grief may not accelerate recovery, but may improve their capacity to cope. Research shows that some bereaved parents find grief support groups, counseling, and help from medical professionals useful and helpful. Research also shows that these groups are often ill-prepared to provide sufficient crisis or long-term support to the bereaved. The burden of responsibility for providing support through traumatic grief falls on family and friends. Yet often with the death of a child, family and friend relationships are strained, as family members may also be grieving, or the offered support diminishes quickly while the need for support continues. The pandemic further challenged access to family or formal supports. Podcasts have the potential to connect people and make them feel less alone. A podcast is defined as any digital media file or series of files distributed over the internet for playback on portable media players and personal computers. Although the number is constantly changing, recent statistics indicate that there are currently over 1 million podcasts with over 30 million podcast episodes in Canada. Podcasts cover a wide variety of topics and genres. Perhaps most importantly, though, podcasts are free. People can re-listen to or turn off content if it doesn't relate to their story or experience.
In the summer of 2021, we conducted focus groups and interviews with bereaved parents. 24 bereaved parents with lived experience of stillbirth in the past 5 years connected with us via Zoom. Zoom facilitated the inclusion of voices throughout Canada and enabled us to hear perspectives of bereaved parents living outside urban centers without access to high-level services. Participants identified as birth parents, and some had experienced stillbirth as recently as 1 month prior to the interview. We asked participants 3 questions. First, we asked them to share their birth story of their child who was stillborn. Second, we asked about their support or lack of support they received after their stillbirth experience. Third, we asked them about podcasts. Participants painted a picture of how a podcast could help other families living through the trauma of stillbirth. In this presentation, we will share their voices with you. Ray from Focus Group 3 felt thankful for being involved in the focus group because it provided support for her as she was grieving. I was very anxious about hitting Zoom today. I'm not gonna lie. I ended up going to a baby shower yesterday. In hindsight, I should never have gone. So I had a really shit day today. Now I feel like, yeah, this was supposed to happen, and I'm glad for it. You're coming where I'm at right now on my path, listening to you guys and just kind of observing you guys. You know, I'm appreciative of that. Overwhelmingly, participants were enthusiastic about podcasts as support following stillbirth. As TI from Focus Group 4 shares, podcasts allow people to learn, grieve, find community, normalize grief, and equip them with a world uncomfortable talking about stillbirth and death. Podcasts could provide some comfort to bereaved parents. It would give them access to resources that they never would have thought they needed. And it would just make them feel like they're not alone. Stillbirth, unfortunately, still happens, and maybe one day it won't. But in the meantime, we can all be there for each other. Participants were clear the podcast would benefit many audiences. They felt diverse types of bereaved parents would benefit from hearing other stillbirth stories, connecting with others with similar experiences, and learning about ways to memorialize their babies as part of their grieving process. They felt friends and family could learn what to say, when to say it, how to say it, and that sometimes you don't need to say anything at all. Just hold space. They were enthusiastic about support for their partners. They felt clinicians, primary care specialists, labor and delivery nurses, public health nurses, lactation consultants, and more would all benefit from hearing about the importance of the birth story experience from parents who delivered babies who were stillborn. They wanted clinicians to understand what to do, what not to do, what to say, and what not to say. Participants agreed the same podcast could benefit all 4 audiences in different ways.
Using Cacciatore's framework of the 4 supportive actions around grief, participants recommended 4 different types of podcasts around the topic of stillbirth. For acts of emotional caring, Anna from Focus Group 1 says podcasts could help teach what to say, what not to say, what to do, what not to do. For instrumental support, SP from Focus Group 4 says, if you were interviewing people from the community, whether it be, a local counselor's office or local postpartum support program or whatever, having those people on, I think that helps people be like, oh, that resource is there, and then have a way to connect to it. So a podcast that includes this information could teach bereaved parents that connecting with these services is beneficial as they grieve. For appraisal support, CA from Focus Group 1 shared, hearing other stories could be helpful for parents, and it's part of that whole knowing you're not alone and other people have been through it and here's what helped. It can be really validating for people. And for emotional support, SP from Focus Group 1 believes emotional support comes in all forms. And I think it's just helpful for people to hear stories too. So even just interviewing other lost parents and hearing those stories and whether they connect with them by following them on Instagram or whatever, I think that's helpful too. Participants felt podcasts were an excellent support for diverse audiences and especially families who are living through grief after stillbirth. Participants felt podcasts could help by knowing you're not alone, finding ways that other people have coped, to memorialize your child, to have a space to commemorate your baby's memory, and to prepare for people to say the wrong thing, because people are going to say the wrong thing. San from Focus Group 3 highlighted why podcasts were a medium of support all participants agreed with. So moms and dads and parent birthing people who are a little further down that journey, or who could look back and have a conversation about it and have some sort of retrospective ideas about what had happened and whatnot, I would find that very helpful. Not just medical or experts or social, like just people with lived experiences. I would listen to it all day. That just seems like it hits home the most, is listening to stories of people who have walked this road with you. Participants described their need for support on their grieving journey. They longed for connection from others with lived experience. They ached for company from those who truly understood the journey of stillbirth. Podcasts could be their support, their connection, their company.
Coming into this project as a bereaved parent and being asked to do research has been interesting. I have learned a lot, and I still have so much more to learn. Being surrounded and supported by the Hummingbird team, an incredible group of women, all working towards the same end goal, has been a pleasure. For myself, I know how difficult it can be to open up to complete strangers and tell others my story of Ryan and her stillbirth. To work together on the Hummingbird Project is a passion, all for our own reasons. I am passionate about this project for a couple of reasons. I'm excited that one day we will provide a service that can reach all across Canada, to any small town, any large city, and everywhere in between. The potential of this podcast is powerful. Soon bereaved parents won't need to travel to access support. They will be able to access it in the comfort of their own homes. Most importantly, honoring the babies. Parents have so bravely and lovingly shared their stories. I want to honor these stories by making sure we provide much needed support. When it comes to traumatic grief, we need support. We need to be heard. We need people to listen. When we do that, change starts to happen. A hummingbird's wings move at such incredible speeds when hovering that it makes them appear still. The hummingbird was chosen to represent our project for its magical connection to stillness, as well as for its grace and beauty. Hummingbirds seem fragile, yet are hardworking animals. On behalf of the Hummingbird team, we want to thank our bereaved parent partners for trusting us with their birth stories and for holding space with us. This work is dedicated to our bereaved parent partners who are fierce fighters, defenders of their baby's memory and legacy. Though our babies were born still, they can have an impact on the world. Thank you.